Welcome, everyone. I am Michael Nutter, Mayor of the City of Philadelphia, President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Of course, we are about to officially kick off our conference. There have been a series of meetings already this morning. I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues, the leaders of America's great cities. I'm going to make some opening remarks. You'll hear from a couple other mayors. All of the mayors will identify themselves, and then we'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have. As the nation prepares for the presidential inaugural and the beginning of the new Congress, mayors from all across America are gathered here in Washington, D.C. to discuss the critical issues impacting our cities and our metropolitan areas. Issues like the fiscal cliff, Hurricane Sandy, and other natural disasters and how they get funded. Of course, the issue of violence is very much in the public dialogue right now and how we create safer communities. Issues of taxes and municipal bonds, infrastructure improvements and investments. There are many, many, many critical issues facing America today. And while we are mayors from large and small cities, from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North and the South, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, we do manage to work together and find common ground on these important issues and many others that are on the hearts and minds of our constituents who live in our communities. And that's because mayors get things done every day. We make the tough decisions and we balance our budgets. And again, we find common ground for the good of our people. And so we're here today and throughout the rest of this week to press the Congress to do the same thing, to make those tough decisions, find common ground for the good of the American people. In a united, bipartisan voice, mayors have called on Washington to find real solutions to deficit reduction challenges, the fiscal cliff, the debt ceiling, and so many other issues that are right in front of us. We're also calling on Washington to not lose focus on what should be the number one priority of the United States of America, that is jobs, job growth, and investment in communities all across America. We are the nation's economic engines. Cities generate 90% of the gross domestic product of the United States of America. We are the economy of the United States. We need to make sure that the federal government never forgets our cities. There's been much discussion, of course, about the issue of public safety and violence in our country. The U.S. Conference of Mayors has long championed the issue of public safety and crime reduction. We know, of course, that far too often it is the mayor who gets that call about a tragedy that takes place in our community. And whether it's on a street corner or in a school, we're the ones who ultimately are responsible for what happens in our cities. We get those calls. We talk to families. We see those children. We see adults each and every day, and it is our challenge to make sure that our communities are safe. There are a number of measures and ideas that are out in the public dialogue, and we don't have to go through each and every one of them. As mayors representing so many different communities across America, we will have different views and different opinions because of the different constituencies that we represent. But there is one thing that we all agree on, that we want our constituents and our residents to be safe. We want them to be able to go to school. We want them to be able to go to the supermarket. We want them to be able to go and worship or do the things that Americans get to do because we do believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so there are many, many other issues that do confront us, as I mentioned, and I'll wrap up. Infrastructure, education, advanced manufacturing, a concern about the future of municipal bonds, sequestration, taxes, spending, and social services. And the mayors, of course, in their respective cities will have their own views and take their own actions back home that are in the best interest, in their view, of their constituents. We will support those efforts and those officials who are focused on the bigger picture, the broader agenda, to make sure that America is strong, that America is safe, and that we're doing things that not only sustain investments in our cities, but also strengthen us around the world. We need our Congress to take the same kind of bold, day-to-day action to do their job and ultimately to vote, because that's what members of a legislative body do. They vote. They take action. And the time for action on so many of these issues that I've mentioned, the time for action is right now. No delay. No more debate. Let's take action, be strong, stand up and be good elected officials, and make things happen, because that's what mayors do each and every day. I'm pleased to introduce our Vice President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the great mayor of Mesa, Arizona, Mayor Scott Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Nutter. I cannot improve on the eloquent way that our president discussed what is important to us and what we're going to be talking. The great thing about this organization is you do bring mayors from around the country, from different persuasions, from different parts with different constituencies. But at the end of the day, you get in the room, we talk about solving problems. Many of the problems that we have stem from an economy which still has not kicked in and gotten back to where we are. We still have too many of our citizens who are out of work, who are either unemployed or underemployed, and that remains a major focus of ours. And we want the country, even though we tend to have the topic du jour, and there's many of those, to recognize that this is what we are committed to long term. I was talking with a CEO in Arizona the other day, and he asked me a question. He says, there's been a study that shows how businesses and how consumers react to decisions. Whether it's a good decision or a bad decision, businesses and consumers seem to be able to adjust. They adapt. When there's no decision, they can't. What they do is they stand back. They sit on the sidelines. So I'd echo his call and the call of the conference, which has been consistent for action in Washington, for decisions in Washington. And while, of course, we'd love them to be all good decisions, we'd rather have a decision that shows consistency and that gives our citizens and our businesses confidence that they can move ahead. One issue that is especially important to us, which isn't really sexy, but it's incredibly important, which is the tax-exempt status of municipal bonds. Remember, when municipal bonds are just not for cities. Our universities, our special districts, our fire districts, our improvement districts, our states rely on this financing technique to literally fund, if not hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars of infrastructure and public improvements. We recognize that that now that we've sort of passed one semi-fiscal cliff and we've set in permanent tax rates, that there is going to be sort of expeditions looking for other sources of revenue. We are firm, and we're firm with our state and county officials in reminding people how significant it is if the tax-exempt status of municipal financing is affected. The huge impact on not only the increased cost for cities of financing, but actually our ability to finance, which once again doesn't create jobs if you're limiting infrastructure projects, doesn't provide services if you can't update that water system, that sewer system, or put in that new fire station. This is our lifeblood. And like I said, it's not one of the sexiest issues, but it's one that we will continue to hammer. We will continue to work with our cohorts at the counties and the state to let Washington understand that what would in essence be a giant transfer has huge impacts on Main Street. So I thank all of my mayors for being here. I look forward to discussing the issues of importance, the broad range of issues of importance, and to have a free exchange of ideas. But as Mayor Nutter said, at the end of the day, it's funny. You get in a room and you can't tell where a mayor comes from, except for you know that a mayor is committed to doing what's right for his or her community. Thank you.
We'll now hear from Baltimore's Mayor, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake.
Thank you very much, Mayor Nutter. I'm very proud to stand here with the President of the Conference of Mayors, the Vice President of the Conference of Mayors, and mayors from across our country, because we stand at a very unique time in our country's history. There are pressing issues that face our country that need the buy-in from an organization like the Conference of Mayors, where, as Mayor Smith said, half of us don't know who's a Democrat and a Republican, but we know how to work together, and that's what is needed in Congress today. When there's a water main break, when there's a bridge that crumbles, there's not a mark after it that says D or R. when there's a homicide, when there's violence, there's not a note after that says what party the individual's affiliated with. Violence, infrastructure needs, these don't have party affiliation. These are American issues that we have to face every single day. And our country has had a history of making these issues bipartisan. And we need to return to that today to make sure that those investments are made. Because when an infrastructure job is created, when an infrastructure project is moved forward, that's a job that can't be exported out of the country. That's a job that has to take place in our cities, in our states. And when we make our jurisdictions safer, that makes it better for everyone and allows our economies to flourish. So I'm very proud to stand here with mayors who we don't all agree on how we're going to get to the answers on these important questions, but we do have an unyielding commitment to work together across party lines to figure it out. Thank you.
The great mayor of Fresno, California, Ashley Swearingen.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mayor Nutter. It is a pleasure to be here and a privilege to join with mayors from around the country, as we do every year, come together and talk about the things that need to happen at the local level and what needs to happen here in our nation's capital to make sure that we have success at the local level. You'll find no more committed group in this country than mayors when it comes to jobs. We all understand that everything changes in our local communities when people are able to go back to work. Unemployment rates go down, poverty levels go down, homes are stabilized, education is improved. Across society, there are positive impacts to job creation. So today, among many of the other things that are being dealt with by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we're teaming with our partners in the federal government and leaders from the White House and a number of agencies to figure out how we put together a Mayor's Institute on Economic Development that will train and equip mayors from across the country to make sure that the right plans are in place, that every aspect that contributes to economic development is moving forward, and no other elected official has such a role to play as a mayor. So in addition to lobbying and representing interests of cities here in Washington, D.C., we're also dealing with how do we equip mayors across the country to do what they need to do at the local level to ensure job creation. So again, I know joblessness has been on the front of every newspaper for the last 4 years. We've gotten a little bit desensitized to the realities of job creation, economic development at the local level, except mayors haven't forgotten. We continue to be fighting and pushing for solutions to business support and job creation at the local level. And again, one of many subjects being dealt with here at the conference this week. So I look forward to speaking with my colleagues and figuring out how to move this program forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Our last speaker is the Dean of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, our great, great leader and friend, Mayor Joe Riley.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. You can't tell whether we're Democrats or Republicans or where we're from, but you can probably tell I'm from the South, or at least not from the, figure that out. And there are many issues facing us. Mayors know that our first responsibility at home is to make our community safe. And the Vice President is speaking to us in a few hours about the work that he has done in the report of the President of the United States about our country responding to the tragedy of Newtown, Connecticut, and the pressing challenge of making our community safe. It's so important in a democracy that we all work very hard to make sure that public policy is consistent with the wishes and the hearts and minds of our citizens. Oftentimes, it is a silent majority, not special interests or groups, but the way people feel. We do that in our cities, always trying to know where our citizens' hearts are. And so I believe, speaking for me, that it is so important that our country sees this moment with the comprehensive and moderate, commonsensical recommendations that the President has made to help make our community safe. I know that no police officer wants to be confronted with an assault weapon. They will be out-ammoed. And I think that it's time for our country to deal with this. It's time for the Congress to deal with this. And I believe that what the President of the United States has recommended is a sound, comprehensive, reasonable, commonsensical approach that can make our community safer.
Thank you, Mayor Rowley. Let me ask the mayors to quickly identify themselves, and at that point, we'll be glad to try to take any questions from the media. I'm going to start way over on the side there.
Nelda Martinez, Mayor of Corpus Christi, Texas.
Lori Mosley, Mayor of Miramar, Florida.
Kim McMillan, Mayor of Clarksville, Tennessee.
Frank Ortis, Mayor of Pembroke Pines, Florida.
Roy Buell, Mayor of Dubuque, Iowa.
Steve Benjamin, the Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina.
Scott Smith, Mesa, Arizona.
Stephanie Rawlings Blake, Baltimore, Maryland.
Sly James, Kansas City, Missouri. Frank County, Des Moines, Iowa.
Brian Waller, Mayor of Piscataway, New Jersey.
Mayor Joy Cooper from the city of Hallandale Beach, Florida.
Maria Weinberger, Mayor of Burlington, Vermont.
Mayor Joanne Graves from Gallatin, Tennessee.
Bill Wild, Mayor of City of Westland, Michigan.
Mayor Edna Jackson, Savannah, Georgia.
Ashley Swearingen, Fresno, California.
Mayor Raul Salinas, Laredo, Texas.
Mayor Tony Mack, Trenton, New Jersey.
Mayor Jennifer Pedrine, Ville Platte, Louisiana.
Alan Joins, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Richard Clanton, City of Kentwood, Michigan.
Jim Brainerd, Carmel, Indiana.
Brian Barnett, Mayor of Rochester Hills, Michigan.
Elizabeth Kautz, Burnsville, Minnesota, and past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors.
Harvey Johnson, Jackson, Mississippi.
John Linder, Chester, Pennsylvania.
Joe Riley, Charleston, South Carolina.
Of course, our CEO and Executive Director, Tom Cochran, who is over on the side. We recognize him and appreciate, of course, his great service and leadership, and the entire staff of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We may be mayors, but we actually don't run the conference when we meet, and would not be able to get things done without a great staff. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions that you might have. Yes, ma'am.
Is the conference going to issue any kind of joint response to President Obama's 23 executive orders?
Well, by the sheer timing of where we are, the President and Vice President laid out a pretty large set of ideas and plans about 24 hours ago. And we're assembled here today. What I can assure you is there will be a significant amount of discussion and conversation about the comprehensive plan that the President has put out. I can't tell you whether through the course of the next couple of days the conference will have a specific position. But as I said in my remarks earlier, the one thing I know we all agree on is that we want our communities to be safe. We come from a variety of places that have different thoughts and ideas about gun ownership and gun safety and gun regulations. We must incorporate all of those thoughts and ideas in our discussions. We're unified about the issue of safety. We'll have different views because we're from different places. But at the moment, here on Thursday, I can't tell you whether or not out of this conference in the next 2 or 3 days, whether the conference will have a specific position on a rather lengthy list of executive orders as well as potential legislative action that will be taken.
Just on muni bonds, you said that's one of your top priorities. The Obama administration's called for capping the exemption at 28%. I'm just wondering what's so wrong with that? You would still have a tax advantage with the debt.
Yeah, it becomes more expensive for us to borrow money and lessens the amount of money that we'd have to invest in infrastructure. So, of course, we're opposed to that, and we've communicated that directly. I have personally to Vice President Biden and his staff and others in the White House. Municipal bonds are the largest single source of funding for infrastructure projects in all of our cities and in counties and municipalities as Mayor Smith mentioned, and other entities, other organizations use that particular financing vehicle. So, for those who maybe don't do this on a daily basis, you say, well, this number, that number, the other number. Well, numbers actually matter. And this one matters a lot, and it is one of our top priorities. We need municipal bond market to be strong. We need to make sure that it is accessible to as many people as possible, and that we not have caps in place, which will only increase our borrowing costs and lessen the amount of money that we're able to put into projects. Other than that, it's just a bad idea.
It's kind of an erudite issue, the tax rate and what that means. So I'm from a smaller city, but just an example. We recently went out on revenue bonds for major drainage initiatives. And based on the stream of revenue, we were able to issue $54 million worth of bonds based on the current tax rates and the fact that the interests revenues that bondholders hold are tax-free. If you adjust the rate down, probably that $54 million would have been, $43 million or so. But what that is that's the difference in infrastructure expenditure and investment that a city makes. So it's infrastructure, it's job creation, it's capital improvements for citizens, and if you bring the rate down, you reduce the infrastructure investment and you raise the borrowing costs.
Next question.
Mayor Nutter, after the Newtown shooting, the conference put out a statement saying it was calling on the President and Congress to enact an assault weapons ban and a ban on high-capacity magazines, to strengthen the background check system, and to strengthen the penalty for the straw purposes of guns. Is that still the position of the conference? It sounded like you were leaving some wiggle room here today.
No, I wasn't. I was asked a specific question about the announcement from yesterday.
What
What does
the conference want to see on gun regulation?
Okay. The letter you referenced, I believe, is dated December 17th, 2012, obviously before the announcement of yesterday. Over 200 mayors signed that letter. The U.S. Conference of Mayors has had a 40-year history on the issue of public safety, and it is already kind of settled policy, I believe, back from 1994, that the conference has opposed the continued accessibility of assault weapons or high-capacity magazines. The question I was asked was about yesterday's announcement and whether the conference had taken a position on that. The answer is no. That was 24 hours ago, and the mayors were probably either all traveling or saw something on TV. So we haven't had a chance to really discuss it. The letter is the letter. We stand behind the letter. 200 mayors signed that letter, and the conference has a long-standing position on these issues.
So can you explain why the conference wants to see those things?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain the conference's long-standing policy, what you'd like to see and why there?
The long-standing policy is that we are for an assault weapons ban, again, as a conference over a long, long period of time, or high-capacity magazines or clips. We want people to be safe. The issues that were raised yesterday are even much more expansive, and as some have said, and I've said, we believe comprehensive and common sense, but we would like to read all of the material. We have this stickler about ourselves as mayors. We like to read. That's where we are. Sure. Yes, sir.
One reason that we have the position that we have is because although the issues of Newtown were extremely tragic, probably one of the worst periods in our history with regards to violence, the fact of the matter is that we've been committing slow motion mass murder for years. The relatively inconsistency of mass murders, which by no means lessens the tragedy of it, is what draws everybody's attention. But what we live with every day is that slow motion mass murder that occurs on our streets. Kansas City has, for the last 15, 20 years, had a murder rate of over 100 young people per year. 108 this year, 109 last year, so we've had one less this year than last, and by this year I mean 2012. But it has been a consistent position of mayors across this country who have to deal with the repercussions of the proliferation of illegal guns on our streets and the results of that, the carnage, the health care costs, the disruption of lives, the bad images that come from it, the impossible problem-solving messes that we get into, that we need to do something about it. And if we can get something done now, I think that's what we've always been shooting for, but make no mistake about it, this isn't a new position, it's an old position.
Yes, ma'am.
Is anyone up there opposed to gun control? Anyone?
We don't usually do polls at our press conferences. The mayors, I have no idea what the position of most of the mayors are. We're not going to go down the line. You certainly are free to talk to the mayors when the press conference is over. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you've, as you just said, you've talked about gun control or gun violence for a long time, and obviously here in Washington, they haven't talked about it in a long time. There are a lot of people in this town who sort of feel like this discussion of the post-Newtown sort of gun violence push is going to end in the partisan gridlock that so many other things in Washington have ended in over the past couple of years. Does this feel different to you guys? Do you think that that's going to happen, and what are you going to do to try to prevent that from happening?
It does feel very different. I think, again, even for many members of Congress, as we see the different ideas and positions coming out, and again, I don't want to get much into a Democrat or Republican kind of thing, but we are certainly seeing and hearing different voices in this conversation, folks who maybe had not been part of this debate and discussion in years past. And so I've said before, I think there is something very, very different about Newtown on the heels of Aurora and Tucson. But as Mayor Sly James said, many of us deal with these kinds of issues on a day-to-day basis. There may not be 20 children in a school, but in Philadelphia last year, unfortunately, I had 331 murders throughout the course of the year. That's a whole lot of people, and that's less than when I came into office, but nonetheless, it's 300 plus folks. So I think all of us will deal with this issue, as we say, back home in our own way. We're a large organization representing small, medium, and large cities all across America with different ideas and different views and different constituencies, and we respect that because our main job is to try to make our community safer, to focus on investments, to make sure our kids are educated, to build bridges and roads, and rehabilitate schools. So there are a lot of issues, and this is a real important one, but it's not the only one that's going on in Washington, D.C., and we're a big enough organization that we can actually do more than one thing at a time. Last question.
A lot of the initiatives you talked about depend on acts of Congress, and there's a lot of talk here about spending cuts. How do you feel about the threat to some of these things that affect the cities, and which would you most want to see preserved? And to what extent have the cities recovered from the recession?
Well, obviously we're concerned about spending cuts, and unfortunately, a lot of the discussion seems to revolve around that and kind of almost end with that. Again, as executives, we not only have dealt with cuts, all of us have already been to the fiscal cliff and back. Right? We dealt with this 2-3 years ago. The federal government, quite honestly, is just really kind of getting around to it. And the Congress, welcome to the Great Recession. What we also should be talking about, though, is investments. How do you jumpstart the economy? We are the economy. When you invest in us, the gentleman asked a question about why do municipal bonds matter. As Mayor Riley said, it's the difference between $55 million in spending or $40-something million in spending. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of jobs. And so we know that because of the economy, yes, there will be cuts, and there's no one thing. We have a bunch of things that we're concerned about on the cut side. We need to focus on the revenue side and the investment side, infrastructure, research and development, education, innovation, energy, clean tech, advanced manufacturing. There are a lot of places where smart investments would result in an improved economy, more jobs, a greater tax base, and the ability for us to do what needs to be done on the ground to get America back to work.
Can I say something on that, Mr. President?
Sure. Okay.
Just real quick, Mr. President, you were so articulate. You know what? We're done. This is the largest U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting we've had. These mayors are angry. We're angry. I'm the chair of the Workforce, Jobs, and Education Committee. We're demanding from Congress. Your question, sir, was so pertinent, and our president answered it so articulately. But you put people back to work, you're going to fix a lot of things. In our cities where we have sinkholes and bridges that are falling, we can't afford to fix them. It's the federal government's job. It's time Congress gets off their duff and fixes our problems. It's time. The elections are over. If nobody realized it, let me tell you, the elections are over. It's time to get this country back on its feet. And that's all I'm going to say.
I wish I had said that.
Thank you very much. Frank, I'm a lot less soft-spoken than Frankie Ortis. To your question, I think it's important to note that non-defense discretionary spending is taking a significant hit over the last several years. So we believe cities and counties have done our fair share. To your earlier question about the muni bonds issue, it's important to note that 85% of people who invest in municipal bonds earn less than $250,000 a year. This is not a rich man's investment tool, and that's so important to note. And if we believe that putting people back to work, as Mayor Smith and others have been crisscrossing the country, encouraging investment in infrastructure, you have to recognize that 75% of the nation's infrastructure is built by state and local governments using this municipal bond vehicle. And we built 4 million miles of roadway, 100,000 bridges, 1,000 mass transit systems. But the proposals that one that you mentioned also have also called for retroactivity of some of these provisions on the $3.7 trillion of existing debt that's out there. And we see that as signaling to the capital markets a federal divestment. In the relationship that we've had for the last 100 years between state and local governments not taxing federal interests, the $11.3 trillion out there, and the federal government not taxing interest on municipal bonds. So it certainly has dollars and cents explanation that Mayor Riley talked about. I can tell you how we'll have to buy 20 less police cars. How in our water and sewer fund that we're in the middle of a $500 million expansion, how that will cost us an additional, if you're looking at a 2 basis points increase or 3 basis points, an additional $6 million that we can't put into the ground to make sure that we meet EPA requirements to meet our citizens' needs for clean water. But probably the most important point I want to stress is that you can talk about investors, you can talk about infrastructure and jobs, but the reality is that this is a shift of responsibility from the federal government to local governments and to our taxpayers and to our ratepayers. People who are modest in incomes on the local level will have to bear the brunt of this type of shift. The relationship between the federal government and municipalities over the last 100 years since the inception of income tax has been sacrosanct, and we need to make sure we preserve it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I need to bring this particular press conference to a conclusion. We've got a very intense schedule over the next few hours. Thank you so much for being here.